My name is Amanda. I'm 27 years old, and I never thought my mother would slap me in front of our entire family on Easter Sunday. Growing up in a strict religious household in small-town Missouri shaped me in ways I'm still discovering. That fateful Easter changed everything about our relationship, but what surprised me most was what happened next. When her church got involved, I realized this wasn't just about a slap. Before I dive into this story, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments, hit subscribe if you've ever had to set boundaries with family, and like this video if you believe spiritual communities should support, not control. I grew up in Mapleton, a town so small that everyone knew everyone's business before they knew it themselves. My mother, Diana, was what people politely called devoted to her faith. In reality, she ruled our household with an iron fist wrapped in a Bible verse. Every Sunday morning, without fail, we'd be in the third pew from the front at Mapleton Community Church, dressed in our carefully selected outfits that my mother had laid out the night before. Appearances meant everything to her. Our family was her personal showcase of religious devotion. My father, Robert, was essentially a background character in our family dynamic. He went to work at the local hardware store, came home, and followed, whatever my mother decided. I can count on one hand the times I saw him stand up to her, and each attempt fizzled out like a match in a rainstorm. The church itself was small, but influential in our community. About 200 members, most having attended for generations. Think potlucks, prayer circles, and a deep interest in everyone's personal decisions. Pastor Williams had led the congregation for over 20 years and was practically a member of every family in the church. As a child, I absorbed my mother's beliefs without question. I attended Sunday school, Bible camp, and youth group. I was the picture-perfect daughter she wanted to display. But something changed when I went to college at the state university 90 miles away. It wasn't some dramatic rebellion. I simply met people with different perspectives and began asking questions I'd never considered before. I started with small deviations, skipping church occasionally when I came home for weekends, reading books that weren't on my mother's approved list, befriending people my mother would consider lost souls. Each tiny step away from her prescribed path created ripples of tension between us. After graduation, I took a job at a design agency in Springfield, about 40 minutes from Mapleton. Close enough to visit, far enough to breathe. My career as a graphic designer flourished, and last December I received a promotion to senior designer, which meant more responsibilities and occasionally working weekends. My mother viewed my career success with suspicious eyes. All those hours at that office, Amanda. What about finding a good Christian husband? What about starting a family? Time doesn't wait, you know. These comments peppered every phone call and visit, along with critiques about my apartment, my clothes, my friends. I tried maintaining peace by compromising where I could. I'd still visit for major holidays and some Sundays. I'd listen patiently to her not-so-subtle matchmaking attempts with various nice young men from church. I avoided mentioning my evolving spiritual beliefs, which had grown into something more inclusive and less rigid than what I was raised with. The Christmas before the Easter incident was a preview of what was to come. My mother spent the entire dinner comparing me to my cousin Rebecca, who had just gotten engaged to her college sweetheart. A youth pastor, of course. Rebecca knows what matters in life, my mother had said, looking pointedly at me. Some things are more important than fancy job titles. Despite all this, I still wanted to make an effort for Easter. I spent weeks finding the perfect gifts, a handcrafted devotional journal for my mother, a quality fishing tackle set for my dad, and small, thoughtful items for my aunts, uncles, and cousins. I even bought a new dress that I thought would strike the balance between my style and my mother's conservative expectations. I wanted so badly for this visit to be different. Easter Sunday arrived with perfect spring weather, sunshine, blue skies, and just enough breeze to rustle the daffodils lining my parents' walkway. I pulled into their driveway at 9:30, timing my arrival to help with last-minute preparations. Before the extended family showed up after church service, my mother opened the door before I could knock, her eyes immediately scanning my appearance. I had chosen a light blue dress that fell just below my knees, with short sleeves and a modest neckline. For a moment, I thought I'd succeeded in pleasing her. "Amanda, couldn't you have done something with your hair? And those shoes are awfully casual for Easter." She sighed, stepping aside to let me in. Everyone will be here soon. Inside, the house smelled of ham, cinnamon rolls, and the specific floral arrangement my mother insisted on every Easter, lilies mixed with baby's breath. Dad was in his recliner watching pre-game coverage of a baseball match, but stood when I entered. "There's my girl," he said, giving me a brief hug. "Trip okay?" Before I could answer, my mother interjected, "Robert, the table needs setting. Amanda can help me in the kitchen." By 11:30, the house was filled with relatives. Aunt Patricia and Uncle George arrived with their children, my cousins Rebecca, Thomas, and Melissa. Aunt Patricia was my mother's sister and shared many of her rigid beliefs, though with slightly less intensity. Uncle George, like my father, seemed content to exist in the background of family dynamics. Rebecca, 25 and newly engaged, wore her diamond ring like a spotlight, making sure it caught the light whenever possible. Her fiancé, Luke, stood dutifully by her side, occasionally quoting scripture in casual conversation. Thomas and Melissa, both still in college, seemed more interested in the food than family politics. "Amanda, Rebecca was just telling us about the wonderful church counseling she and Luke are doing before their wedding," my mother announced as we gathered around the dining table. "Isn't that responsible of them?" "That's great," I replied, passing the mashed potatoes. "I've been busy too. The company just assigned me to lead our biggest client account." My mother responded with a tight smile. "Well, careers change, but family and faith are forever. Right, Patricia?" Aunt Patricia nodded vigorously. "Absolutely. Rebecca and Luke are laying the foundation for a godly household." I caught my cousin Thomas rolling his eyes slightly and felt a moment of solidarity. Throughout the meal, I tried steering conversations toward neutral territory, asking Thomas about his engineering classes, complimenting Aunt Patricia on her earrings, discussing the unseasonably warm spring with Uncle George. Each attempt was short-lived, as my mother would inevitably redirect the conversation back to church activities, Rebecca's wedding plans, or thinly veiled comments about my life choices. "Amanda used to be so involved in youth group. Such a shame she doesn't have time for church activities anymore." After the main course, I offered to help clear the table and prepare dessert. In the kitchen, my mother handed me dishes to dry while she washed. "You know," she said in a low voice, "Pastor Williams was asking about you last Sunday. He mentioned there's a new young man in the congregation. An accountant, very respectable. I told him you'd be at service next week." "Mom, I didn't say I'd be at service next week. I have a deadline for—" "There are more important commitments than work, Amanda," she cut me off. "You're not getting any younger." Back in the dining room, Rebecca was showing everyone her wedding planning binder, complete with color-coded tabs and Bible verses selected for the ceremony. "Amanda," my mother called out loudly, "did you see that Rebecca has chosen Proverbs 31 as one of her readings? Remember how you used to love that passage about a virtuous woman?" I nodded, trying to maintain my composure. Inside, I was counting the hours until I could reasonably leave. My father caught my eye across the table and gave me a small, sympathetic smile. It wasn't much, but in that moment, it helped. As dessert was being served, my mother's traditional coconut cake and lemon bars, the conversation turned to church gossip. Mrs. Johnson's daughter had gotten divorced. The youth pastor was considering a position at a larger church, and the annual mission trip was undergoing changes due to budget constraints. "Amanda," my mother said suddenly, "why don't you tell everyone about that little charity thing you've been doing?" The one with the troubled youth? My stomach tightened. She was referring to my volunteer work at Rainbow Bridge, a support center for LGBTQ teens. I'd mentioned it once, months ago, in what I'd foolishly thought was a moment of potential understanding between us. It's a mentorship program, I said carefully. I teach design workshops twice a month. For those confused children, my mother added, her voice dripping with judgment. The ones who need prayer and guidance. I took a deep breath, feeling all eyes on me. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with the silver cake server my mother was gripping too tightly. Before we enjoy our desserts, my mother announced, setting down the cake server, we should give thanks for our blessings. Amanda, why don't you lead us in prayer? It's been so long since we've heard you pray. The request hung in the air like a trap. Every family member turned to look at me, waiting. My heart raced as I realized this was a test, one designed for me to fail. I'd prefer if someone else led the prayer, I said quietly. Maybe Rebecca and Luke, since they're preparing for their new life together. My mother's face hardened. Amanda, I asked you to pray for this family. Is that too much to ask? After everything we've done for you? It's not that I don't want to participate, I explained, trying to keep my voice steady. I just think someone else might. You just think, my mother interrupted, her voice rising. That's the problem, isn't it? All this thinking you've been doing since college, all these new ideas that are more important than how you were raised. Rebecca and Luke exchanged uncomfortable glances. Thomas suddenly became very interested in his napkin. Aunt Patricia's eyes narrowed in disapproval. Mom, can we talk about this later? I asked, acutely aware of every eye on us. No, Amanda, we cannot talk about this later. This is Easter Sunday, the most holy day, and you can't even show enough respect to say a simple prayer? What happened? To the daughter I raised? I'm still your daughter, I said, feeling a lump forming in my throat. I just have different views now. I respect your beliefs, but respect? My mother's voice was sharp enough to make several family members flinch. You call it respect when you abandon everything we taught you? When you work on Sundays instead of attending church? When you volunteer with those people who are living in sin? The dining room fell completely silent. Even the usual background noises, the hum of the refrigerator, the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway, seemed to have been muted. Those people, I repeated, a strange calm coming over me, are teenagers who need support. They're kids who have been rejected by their families, some even kicked out of their homes. I'm trying to help them. They need God's guidance, not encouragement in their lifestyle, my mother retorted. They need acceptance and love, I countered. And I believe that's what Jesus would offer them too. My mother gasped as if I'd slapped her. Don't you dare use the Lord's name to justify sin. You've been corrupted by that liberal city and those godless friends of yours. My friends have shown me more understanding and unconditional love than I've felt in this house for years, I said, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. Ungrateful, my mother hissed. After everything we sacrificed for you. The Christian education we paid for, the values we instilled, the church community we raised you in. And this is how you repay us? By turning your back on everything sacred? I haven't turned my back on what's sacred, I replied, feeling tears beginning to form. I've just found a broader definition of what that means. Amanda, my father interjected weakly. Your mother is just concerned about your spiritual well-being. No, Robert, my mother snapped. Don't make excuses for her. Amanda needs to understand the consequences of her choices. The consequences? I asked. Like what? Being myself? Finding purpose in my work? Helping kids who are suffering? Like eternal damnation, my mother said coldly. Like bringing shame to this family. I'm not ashamed of who I am, I said, standing up from the table. And I don't believe God is either. That's when it happened. My mother lunged forward, her hand connecting with my cheek in a sharp, stinging slap that echoed through the dining room. The force of it snapped my head to the side and sent my napkin fluttering to the floor. For several seconds, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. My cousin Melissa let out a small gasp, quickly muffled by her hand. Uncle George stared intently at his plate. Rebecca clutched Luke's arm, her eyes wide with shock. I touched my cheek, feeling the heat of the handprint my mother had left there. Tears spilled over, running down my face and onto the blue dress I'd chosen so carefully. "Mom?" I whispered, my voice breaking. But my mother stood rigid, her chest heaving with emotion, showing no regret for what she'd done. "You needed that," she said, her voice eerily calm. "You've strayed too far from discipline." In that moment, looking into her eyes, I realized something had fundamentally broken between us. The relationship I'd been trying so desperately to preserve was already gone. "I'm leaving," I said, my voice surprisingly steady despite the trembling I felt throughout my body. "Amanda, wait." My father stood up, finally finding his voice. "Let's all calm down and talk about this reasonably." "There's nothing reasonable about hitting your adult daughter for expressing her beliefs," I replied, already moving toward the hallway where I'd left my purse and car keys. Aunt Patricia followed me, her heels clicking rapidly on the hardwood floor. "Amanda, you know your mother is just emotional about these things. Faith is everything to her. You shouldn't push her buttons like that, especially on Easter." "I didn't push any buttons, Aunt Patricia. I just answered her questions honestly." My aunt sighed, lowering her voice. "Family is family, dear. Sometimes we need to keep certain thoughts to ourselves for the sake of harmony." "Even if that means denying who I am?" I asked, grabbing my purse from the hall table. "It's just one day," she insisted. "You could make an effort." From behind us, my mother's voice rang out. "Let her go, Patricia. If she wants to choose sin over family, that's her decision to make." I turned to see my mother standing in the dining room doorway, arms crossed, expression stony. Behind her, the rest of the family remained seated, looking anywhere but at me. "This isn't about choosing sin," I said. "This is about you not accepting that I can make my own choices about my faith and my life." "Those choices have consequences," my mother repeated. I went upstairs to collect the overnight bag I'd brought, assuming, foolishly, that I'd be staying until Monday morning. In my childhood bedroom, now converted to a sewing room but still containing some of my old things, I allowed myself a moment to break down. Tears flowed freely as I stuffed my toiletries and pajamas into my bag, hands shaking so badly I dropped my hairbrush twice. A soft knock on the door made me quickly wipe my face. My cousin Thomas stood there, looking uncomfortable but concerned. "That was really messed up," he said quietly. "Are you okay?" I shook my head, unable to speak for a moment. "For what it's worth," he continued, "I think what you're doing with those kids sounds important. Aunt Diana is, well, she's stuck in her ways." "Thanks, Thomas," I managed to say. "Do you want me to walk you out? Run interference or something?" I nodded gratefully. As we descended the stairs, I could hear hushed arguments coming from the dining room. My father's voice, unusually assertive. "Diana, you went too far." My mother's indignant response. "She needed discipline, Robert. We've been too soft." In the living room? Melissa was pretending to read a magazine while clearly listening to everything. Rebecca and Luke had moved to the front porch, perhaps to distance themselves from the drama. "I'll get your coat," Thomas said, heading to the closet. My father emerged from the dining room, his face drawn and tired. "Amanda, please don't leave. Like this. Your mother didn't mean to." "Yes, she did," I interrupted. "She absolutely meant to hit me, and she's not sorry. She's upset. We all say things we don't mean when we're upset. This isn't just about today, Dad. This has been building for years. I can't keep pretending to be someone I'm not just to make her happy. Thomas returned with my coat and an awkward attempt at a supportive smile. My father looked deflated, suddenly older than his 58 years. "At least let me walk you to your car," he said. Outside, Rebecca and Luke stepped aside as we passed, murmuring polite but meaningless goodbyes. My father helped me put my bag in the trunk, then stood by my driver's door, seemingly at a loss for words. "I love you, Dad," I said, breaking the E. Silence. "I love you too, sweetheart. This will blow over. Your mother just needs time." "No, Dad. This isn't going to blow over. Something fundamental has changed, and we all need to acknowledge that." He nodded, though I wasn't sure he truly understood. With a quick hug, I got into my car and drove away, watching my childhood home grow smaller in the rearview mirror. The 40-minute drive back to my apartment passed in a blur of tears and racing thoughts. My phone began buzzing with texts before I even reached the highway. From Rebecca, "Praying for you to find your way back to the Lord." From Thomas, "Sorry about everything. Let me know if you need anything." From Aunt Patricia, "Family should always come first, Amanda. Call your mother tomorrow." From Dad, "Drive safe. Love you." Nothing from my mother. By the time I reached my apartment, my emotions had cycled through shock, hurt, anger, and arrived at a strange sense of relief. The confrontation I'd been avoiding for years had finally happened. The pretense was over. I called my best friend, Zoe, who came over immediately with ice cream and a sympathetic ear. As I recounted the day's events, the red mark on my cheek had faded, but the emotional impact remained raw. "You know this isn't your fault, right?" Zoe said firmly. "No one has the right to hit you, especially not your mother." "I keep thinking about what I could have done differently," I admitted. "Maybe if I'd just played along with the prayer. Then you'd be back there next month, playing along with something else, and the month after that, and the month after. That," Zoe pointed out. "This cycle needed to break." Over the next few days, I threw myself into work, grateful for the distraction of deadlines and client meetings. I blocked my mother's number temporarily, needing space to process everything. My father texted daily, brief messages that carefully avoided mentioning the incident. "Beautiful weather today. Saw a cardinal in the backyard. Hope work is going well." I responded with equally neutral messages, maintaining the tenuous connection while protecting my raw emotions. Thomas checked in a couple of times, sharing that things were tense at the house, and my mother was on a spiritual warfare kick, whatever that meant. My friends rallied around me, inviting me to dinner, sending encouraging texts, creating a buffer of support that helped me navigate the conflicting emotions. My therapist, whom I'd been seeing occasionally for general anxiety, fit me in for an emergency session where we discussed family trauma and healthy boundaries. "You're at a crossroads," she told me. "This can be an opportunity to establish the adult relationship you want with your parents, rather than continuing the parent-child dynamic they're comfortable with." By the end of the week, I felt stronger, clearer about my boundaries, and determined to move forward on my own terms. I hadn't expected what came next. The following Sunday, exactly 1 week after Easter, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. Thinking it might be a client, I answered professionally. "Hello, Amanda? This is Mrs. Peterson from Mapleton Community Church." I nearly dropped the phone in surprise. Mrs. Peterson had taught my Sunday school class when I was 8 years old. I hadn't spoken to her in at least a decade. "Mrs. Peterson, hello. This is unexpected." "Well, dear, I've been concerned about you since hearing what happened at Easter. Your mother is beside herself with worry about your spiritual state." I sat down heavily on my couch. "I'm sorry, but what exactly did my mother tell you happened?" "That you've been pulled away from the faith by worldly influences. That you rejected family prayer and stormed out during Easter dinner. We're all very concerned, dear." The selective editing of events didn't surprise me, but the fact that my family drama had become church gossip hit me hard. Mrs. Peterson, I appreciate your concern, but this is a private family matter. But we are family, Amanda, church family, and we don't want to see you straying from the path of righteousness. The conversation continued awkwardly for several minutes before I managed to politely end it. I sat staring at my phone, a sense of violation washing over me. My private family conflict had become community property. 2 days later, another call came, this time from Mr. Winters, one of the church elders, then Mrs. Blackwood from the women's ministry, then 3 more church members I barely remembered. Each conversation followed the same pattern: expressions of concern for my spiritual well-being, thinly veiled judgment about my life choices, and pressure to reconcile with my mother on her terms. By Thursday, I was declining calls from unfamiliar Mapleton numbers, but then my father called, sounding uncomfortable. Amanda, I just wanted to let you know that your mother mentioned what happened at Easter during prayer group. She what? I felt my blood pressure rising. She asked for prayers for your return to the faith. It wasn't supposed to spread beyond the prayer circle, but you know how these things go in a small town. Dad, that's completely inappropriate. My personal life isn't fodder for church gossip. She sees it as spiritual warfare, honey. In her mind, she's fighting for your soul. After hanging up, I paced my apartment, furious at the invasion of privacy. This wasn't just about my mother anymore. It was about an entire community feeling entitled to judge and pressure me. The next day, my doorbell rang unexpectedly. Through the peephole, I saw Mrs. Davis, my mother's closest friend from church, standing on my welcome mat with a foil-covered dish. I seriously considered pretending I wasn't home, but reluctantly opened the door. Amanda, dear, I was in the city for a doctor's appointment and thought I'd bring you some of my lemon bars. I know they're your favorite. They weren't. They never had been. That was Rebecca's preference, not mine. Thank you, Mrs. Davis. That's thoughtful. May I come in for a moment, just to catch up? Against my better judgment, I let her in. Within minutes, the real purpose of her visit became clear. Your mother is fasting for you, you know. 3 days now. She's so devoted to bringing you back to the Lord. Mrs. Davis, I respect that you care about my mother, but this situation is between us. Honoring your mother and father isn't just between you, dear, it's God's commandment. Her smile remained fixed, but her eyes hardened. We've started a special prayer chain for you at church. 24 hours a day, someone is praying for your return to righteousness. After she left, I felt physically ill. The coordination, the invasion, the manipulation, it was overwhelming. My phone showed 3 missed calls, all from Mapleton numbers. That evening, the most surprising call came. Pastor Williams himself requesting to meet with me. Just to talk, Amanda. No pressure. Perhaps at that coffee shop near your office? Neutral ground, so to speak. I hesitated. Pastor Williams had been a significant figure in my childhood. He'd baptized me, counseled me through typical teenage struggles, officiated at my grandmother's funeral. Despite everything, I still respected him. I appreciate you reaching out personally, Pastor Williams. I'll meet you, but I want to be clear that I'm not interested in being pressured or guilted. Just a conversation between old friends, he assured me. We arranged to meet at the Daily Grind, a cafe equidistant from my office and the highway, exit from Mapleton. 2 days later, I arrived early, securing a table in the corner where we could speak privately. Pastor Williams looked older than I remembered, his hair now completely gray, his face more lined. But his warm smile was familiar as he greeted me with a genuine hug. For the first 20 minutes, the conversation was pleasant enough. He asked about my work, listened attentively to my description of recent projects, shared updates about church members I'd been fond of. I began to relax slightly, wondering if I'd misjudged the purpose of this meeting. Then the conversation shifted. Amanda, I've known you since you were a toddler toddling down the church aisle. I've watched you grow in faith and then, well, drift away. Your mother is heartbroken. My mother slapped me across the face in front of our entire family, Pastor Williams. Did she mention that part in prayer group? His expression flickered with genuine surprise. She said there was a disagreement. A disagreement is having different opinions about politics or movies. Hitting your adult daughter is assault. I'm sure she regrets losing her temper, he said carefully. Diana has always been passionate about her faith. Has she told you she regrets it? Because she hasn't told me. In fact, she said I needed discipline. The pastor sighed, stirring his coffee thoughtfully. Families are complicated, Amanda. We all make mistakes. The question is whether we can find forgiveness and reconciliation. Forgiveness requires acknowledgement of wrongdoing and a commitment to change. My mother has offered neither. Perhaps, if you made the first move, why is it always on me to make the first move? Why am I expected to continuously compromise while she gives nothing? As the conversation continued, I realized that despite his gentler approach, Pastor Williams ultimately wanted the same thing as the other church members, for me to reconcile, with my mother on her terms, to return to the church, to conform to their expectations. His methods were kinder, his words more thoughtful, but the goal was identical. Amanda, he said finally, I fear for your spiritual journey. The path you're on leads away from God. With all due respect, Pastor Williams, you don't get to define my relationship with God. Neither does my mother. That's between me and my faith. But without the guidance of the church, without scriptural authority, I still read scripture, I interrupted. I still pray. I still seek to live with compassion and integrity. I just don't believe that requires me to accept emotional abuse or surrender my autonomy. As we parted ways, Pastor Williams handed me a small book. Returning to the Fold, Finding Your Way Back to Faith. I accepted it politely, knowing I wouldn't read it. We're not giving up on you, Amanda, he said, squeezing my shoulder. Your church family will always be waiting. As I watched him walk to his car, I felt a complex mix of emotions: respect for his genuine concern, frustration at his inability to see beyond his own perspective, and a deepening certainty that I needed to take decisive action to protect my well-being. That night, alone in my apartment, I broke down completely. Curled on my bathroom floor, sobbing until my throat hurt, I felt cornered from all sides. My phone kept lighting up with messages from church members, relatives, even childhood acquaintances, who'd heard I was going through a difficult time. The invasion felt relentless. My private pain had become community property, distributed like communion wafers among people who claimed to love me but couldn't respect my boundaries. At midnight, desperate for support, I called my therapist's emergency line. Dr. Mason called back within 15 minutes. Amanda, take a deep breath and tell me what's happening, she said calmly. Through hiccuping sobs, I explained the escalating situation. The church calls, Pastor Williams' meeting, the prayer chain, my mother's fasting for my soul. What you're describing sounds like religious trauma, Dr. Mason said after listening carefully. When religious institutions or family members use faith as a tool for control rather than support, it can create significant psychological distress. I feel like I can't breathe, I admitted. Like there's no escape. But there is, Amanda. You have options. You're an independent adult with the power to set boundaries. We talked for nearly an hour, developing strategies for managing the immediate crisis. Block unknown numbers. Create email filters. Consider temporarily deactivating social media. Take time off work if needed. What about long-term? I asked, exhausted but calmer. That's something to consider carefully. Some clients in similar Situations find that geographical distance helps establish psychological boundaries. Others find that written communication works better than verbal for setting clear limits. After our call, I lay awake until dawn, weighing my options. Moving further away from Mapleton would mean leaving my job, my friends, the life I'd built. Staying meant continuing to fight this battle every day. The next morning, bleary-eyed but determined, I called my supervisor and requested 2 personal days. Family situation, I explained vaguely. Then I turned off my phone and spent the day researching. Apartments in cities at least 3 hours away, job opportunities, cost of living comparisons. Zoe came over that evening with takeout and unwavering support. If moving is what you need to do, I'll help you pack, but I'll miss you like crazy. I don't know if it's the right choice, I admitted. It feels like running away. It's not running away to protect yourself, she countered. It's self-preservation. The following day, I tried one last approach. I called my father when I knew he'd be at work, hoping to speak with him alone. Dad, this has gone too far. The entire church is involved in what should be a private family matter. He sounded tired, defeated. I've tried talking to your mother, Amanda. She believes she's doing what's necessary to save you. From what, Dad? Having my own thoughts? Living my own life? From eternal separation from God, he said quietly. In her mind, nothing could be more important. What about our relationship? Doesn't that matter? His silence told me everything I needed to know. His love for me was real but insufficient to stand against my mother's religious fervor. That weekend brought the final straw. I was working on a freelance project when my doorbell rang repeatedly. Looking through the peephole, I saw 4 women from my mother's prayer group standing in the hallway, Bibles in hand. I didn't open the door. I could hear them praying loudly in the hallway, calling out for God to soften Amanda's hardened heart and bring her back to the path of righteousness. My neighbors peeked out curiously. One asked if he should call security. Panic overwhelmed me. My safe space had been invaded. My breathing became shallow. My heart raced. My vision narrowed. A full-blown panic attack. I slid down against the wall, covering my ears to block out their prayers, feeling as if I were drowning. When they finally left, after nearly 30 minutes, something crystallized within me. This wasn't just about Easter dinner anymore. This wasn't even just about my mother. This was about my right to self-determination, to psychological safety, to define my own relationship with faith and family. That night, with shaking hands but absolute clarity, I wrote 2 letters. The first to my mother. Mom, I love you, but I cannot and will not accept being treated as a project rather than a person. Your actions at Easter crossed a physical boundary. Your involvement of the church crossed a privacy boundary. I am setting clear limits now. I will not respond to messages about my faith or personal choices. I will not meet with church members sent to counsel me. I will not subject myself to emotional manipulation disguised as spiritual concern. When you are ready to relate to me as an adult with valid perspectives, even when they differ from yours, I will be here. Until then, I'm creating the distance necessary for my well-being. The second letter was addressed to Pastor Williams and the church elders. I respect the role you've played in my upbringing, but I must insist that my personal life is not a matter for church intervention. The coordinated efforts to pressure me have crossed ethical lines and must stop immediately. My relationship with God is not determined by my compliance with my mother's wishes or church expectations. Please respect my privacy and my agency as an adult making my own spiritual choices. After mailing both letters, I made my decision. Within 2 weeks, I had secured a job interview in Indianapolis, 3 hours away. Within a month, I had given notice at my apartment and work. The pieces were falling into place for a fresh start, one where I could define the terms of engagement with my family and reclaim my spiritual journey on my own terms. 6 months after that fateful Easter Sunday, I'm sitting in my new apartment in Indianapolis, watching the sunset paint the city skyline in shades of pink and gold. So much has changed, both around me and within me. The move wasn't easy. Leaving my friends, my familiar routines, the security of a job I loved, all of it came with grief and uncertainty. But with that distance came a precious gift: breathing room to heal. My new position at a larger design agency offered unexpected opportunities for growth. Without the constant emotional drain of family conflict, I found more creative energy, more professional confidence. My portfolio expanded, my skills sharpened, and last month I received a performance recognition that would have made the old me call my parents immediately to share the news. Instead, I celebrated with my new friends, a diverse group I've connected with through a local arts collective, a neighborhood book club, and most surprisingly, a spiritual community that bears little resemblance to the church of my childhood. The Inclusive Spirit Center doesn't look like a traditional church, housed in a renovated warehouse with comfortable seating arranged in circles rather than rows. It welcomes people from all faith backgrounds, all life circumstances, all sexual orientations and gender identities. There's music and meditation, discussion and reflection, service projects and social gatherings, but no judgment, no pressure, no claiming exclusive access to divine truth. My relationship with my family has transformed as well. After 2 months of complete separation, I established limited, structured contact with my father. We speak by phone every other Sunday, conversations that carefully avoid religion and focus instead on his garden, my work projects, books we've read, movies we've enjoyed. It's not deep, but it's peaceful, and for now, that's enough. Several cousins, including Thomas, have reached out independently. Thomas even visited Indianapolis last month, and over dinner, he confided that my standing up to my mother had inspired him to examine his own relationship with the church. I never questioned any of it before, he admitted, but seeing how they all ganged up on you, it made me wonder if that's really what faith is supposed to be about. As for my mother, the silence between us stretches on. She refused to accept my boundaries, sending religiously themed cards and messages that ignored everything I'd written in my letter. Eventually, I returned them unopened with a note reiterating my conditions for communication. After the third return, the messages stopped. Through therapy, I've come to understand that my mother's behavior stems from her own fears and rigid worldview rather than genuine malice. This understanding doesn't excuse her actions, but it helps me release some of the anger that once felt like a burning coal in my chest. The most unexpected development came 3 months after my move. Mrs. Reynolds, an elderly woman from my mother's church who had always been kind to me as a child, sent a handwritten letter to my new address. "I've left Mapleton Community Church," she wrote. "After seeing how they treated you, I realized something had gone very wrong with our community. True faith should bring people together in love, not tear families apart in judgment. I'm too old to start over in a new church, but I pray in my garden now, and somehow, God seems closer there than he ever did in that building." Her words brought tears to my eyes, validation that I wasn't crazy for questioning what I'd been raised to accept without doubt. Forgiveness has been a complicated journey. I've learned that forgiving doesn't require forgetting or reconciling. It doesn't mean saying what happened was acceptable. It means releasing the consuming anger that was keeping me tethered to the pain. Some days I manage this better than others. The hardest lesson has been accepting that I cannot change my mother. I cannot make her understand my perspective or acknowledge the harm she caused. Her worldview doesn't allow for that possibility. What I can change is how I respond, what boundaries I maintain, and what role I allow her to play in my life moving forward. I no longer feel guilty for protecting myself. Self-respect isn't selfishness. It's the foundation for all healthy relationships. By refusing to participate in my own diminishment, I honor the authentic self I've worked so hard to discover and nurture. As for the future, I remain open to the possibility of eventual reconciliation with my mother, but only if it can happen, with mutual respect. I won't sacrifice my integrity or autonomy for the appearance of family harmony. Real love doesn't require that kind of surrender. Meanwhile, I'm building a life rich with genuine connections, meaningful work, and spiritual exploration unconstrained by dogma. There's a freedom in this journey that I never experienced when following the prescribed path. It's messier, less certain, but infinitely more authentic. The handprint on my cheek faded within hours of that Easter confrontation. The impact of that moment continues to reverberate through my life, not as an open wound anymore, but as a turning point that ultimately led to greater wholeness. I wonder how many of you watching have faced similar crossroads in your relationships with family or faith communities. Have you had to set difficult boundaries to protect your authentic self? What helped you find your way through? Share your experiences in the comments below. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. And if you found value in my journey, please consider subscribing to this channel and liking this video. Together, we're building a community where we can explore these complex human experiences with honesty and compassion. Thank you for witnessing my story. And remember, sometimes the most loving choice you can make is honoring your own truth, even when others cannot yet understand it.